Hi, I'm Adam, a pharmacist and digital medicines enthusiast. I'm the chap who thought it'd be a good idea to talk about label requirements at a clinical informatics conference. I've managed everything from products to programs of work and now serve the pharmacy department at Birmingham Women's and Children's Hospital. I cannot continue this presentation without first acknowledging some great minds. I've had the pleasure of working with some talented suppliers, pharmacy students and colleagues. One of those colleagues who I'm grateful for their help is also from the University of Nottingham. Professor Avery is a GP and a co-author on this abstract. He also serves as the National Clinical Director for Prescribing at NHS England. Medication labelling piqued my interest whilst collaborating with software suppliers as a customer trying to bring new products to market. On more than one occasion, that has included the area of dispensing, which is the process of transcribing information from a prescription onto labels, then affixing that label onto a medication container. The humble medication label has seemingly stood the test of time, albeit evolving from handwritten to typed. It'll continue to grace boxes in our home until we digitise medications themselves. The use of medication associated labels costs us time and money, and in 21-22, 1 billion items were dispensed by community pharmacy alone in England. That does not include secondary care. In the same time, the NHS spent £17 billion on prescribed medication, and in the 5 financial years from 2015 to 2020, the NHS spent £35 million on damages for settled cases relating to medication errors, and that figure excluded legal costs. And more importantly, to paraphrase NHS CEO Amanda Pritchard at a recent conference, medication errors cost lives and result in direct harm. That medication label remains a sole reference for a patient in relation to directions of use and could be looked upon several times a day. Not so humble after all. If that isn't enough to convince you of the topic's relevance, the dispensing process, in particular labelling of medication, is seen as a great candidate for automation and the use of robotics. To realise that opportunity to more efficiently use time, money and optimise the use of medications prescribed, we must eliminate unnecessary variation. Each medication label is different, but they don't have to be. Variation is a challenge most clinical informaticists are familiar with. Lord Carter estimated that if unwarranted variation is removed from trust spend, £5 billion of savings could be made by 2020. You'd hope in 2023 medication labels were centrally procured. The answer to that question is no. Moreover, given the advent of terms such as managed convergence, you'd think that existing legislation would provide some direction on standardisation. And that formed the basis of the research question: is improved legislation required for the labelling of prescribed medication? A desktop search was undertaken to identify UK and non-UK specific legislation or guidance developed post-2001. Any literature identified would need to be available in full, in English, and mention the process of dispensing. The content would then be analysed and compared to UK legislation. It's important to acknowledge the limitations of our research. Our search for literature may have been limited by requiring the use of the English language or search terms, as there were no credible synonyms for the word dispensing. Moreover, many standards, guidance and legislation would be classed as grey literature and thus be more difficult to access. We found that UK legislation required patient name, the dispensing pharmacy's name and address, date of dispensing, medication name, directions of use and precautions. Whilst it met the minimum recommendations of the International Pharmaceutical Federation, or IFP, it did not meet their recommendation on having a minimum standard for design and readability. The IFP called out the need to have a patient's details on the side of a label, utilise font no smaller than 2 mm, utilise clear fonts such as Arial, utilise print that did not fade when exposed to water or sunlight, ensure that the label should fulfil good readability criteria. UK and Australian legislation was similar but not the same. What Australia has in addition is non-legislated standards on medication label related topics, on anything from consumer confidentiality to labelling of special containers such as eye drops. Here is where the plot thickens. This guidance was not dissimilar to recommendations suggested by the now defunct NPSA, published in 2007. The guidance by the NPSA covered many of the topics the Australian guideline covered, but went further to suggest minimum standards for print and paper quality. So why were these standards not adopted? One of the reasons could be because they were not legislated. Clinical informatics is rife with examples of how legislation has driven standardisation and delivered benefit. For example, where interoperability is concerned, clinical informatics mandates the use of shared terminologies, such as SNOMED CT, or FHIR, or DM+D, and these existing efforts, if mandated for medication labels, would go a long way to standardise 3 of 25 potential areas of standardisation we identified. And standardization works both ways. For example, the Australian Health Authority developed a dose syntax standard as a result of their work on labels, and this could be adopted as a technology standard. Moreover, there is plenty more potential and benefit to derive. Another example is the move to provide bilingual labels or accessible labels. Not only can I conclude that improved legislation is required, but not just for labeling of prescribed medication, but for any standardization effort. Which leads me to my final slide and a call to action. I implore you as the clinical informatician watching this presentation that in whatever capacity you can, you must continue to evidence the benefit of standardization and design with users and patients at the centre. Moreover, we must mandate or encourage the use of standards where there is tangible benefit, as this may drive improvement beyond what is immediately apparent. And remember, next time you see a medication label, think standardization. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.